Well, we've all been in small teams and we know how effective they can be. But at the same time, we witness some of the biggest companies in the world are the ones that really thrive. So how does that work? How is it that small teams and large companies can fit together? Well, fortunately, there's some underlying principles. We're going to find out about those right now. G'day. Are you seeking to be a high performance CEO or develop personal leadership and be a CEO in your own life? Then you've come to the right place because we share real experiences from CEOs for you to learn from. And so you don't miss out, click the like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. Let's get into it. Perhaps you want to build your own Microsoft, Google, Tesla, or even Meta. These major corporations were built from the ground up by leaders who are still there today, governing and guiding their companies. Maybe that doesn't appeal to you. Perhaps as a CEO, you want a smaller, more tight-knit family feel to your business. Either way, it's about people. It's about harnessing the power of people collaborating together and working together to achieve certain goals. It's fundamentally people. Corporations are people. Now, maybe one day we'll see AI generating companies, and that's a scary thought, but for today, it's fundamentally about people. Now, there are underlying governing laws and principles that can be derived mathematically, but also just work in practice. And we're going to get into some of those. Let's check it out. Now, imagine you're alone in a room and somebody walks in and joins you in that room. You have one line of communication. If another person comes in, you've got now three lines of communication. Four, well, something interesting happens. It's 6 lines of communication. A fifth person, it's 10 lines of communication. As you increase more and more people to talk to, the lines of communication go up, and they go up with the square of the number of people. Now, this was defined as a law in telecommunications called Metcalfe's law. And he defined the value, he called it the value of that network as being a function of the square of the number of nodes. So take, for example, a telephone system. You have one telephone connected to another telephone, one line of communication. The value of the network is just one. But as you go and add telephones or fax machines or computers to that network, the value of that network inherently goes up, not linearly, but goes up by the square. And it's actually defined by a formula called n outside of n minus 1 on 2. So if you know the number of nodes, computers, people, or fax machines, telephones, you can just plug that number in and you get the value of the network. Now, Metcalfe published his paper on this in 1983, Metcalfe's law, and it's still used today to describe telecommunication systems and the value of a telecommunication network. Going back to 1980, I was still at school, and me and a mate sat down in a maths class and derived the same formula, n outside of n minus 1 on 2. But we did it using dot line relationships, essentially drawing a dot and a line between them, and we used an empirical method and solved a couple of quadratic equations. Interestingly, that was the lesson that we'd been working on. So the whole idea kind of popped out for us there. Many applications for this law or this principle exist. And if you take another one, for example, the internet has now 6 billion people connected to it. What's the value of the internet? Well, n outside of n minus 1 on 2 gives you a value of that total connectivity available from the internet. So sometimes people don't understand the value of a network inherently within itself. And if we go back prior to the technology revolution, where people were primarily communicating through personal contact or through letters to less extent, you can see the difference that there really is between then and now. And this describes the value. So how does that relate to companies? Well, the more people within a company combined in that internal network, the more inherent value just by having the number of people. A company is far more complicated than that, and there are many other metrics to value a company. But this is one that's inherently based on the number of people and the communication lines. Now, Metcalfe's law has its limitations. People are not computers. People have sensors, they have a brain with limited processing power, and computers don't. They can effectively be scaled. You can always add more processing power and have more and more connections. So you could effectively scale limitlessly Metcalfe's law, but with people that is not possible. There is limitation, and that limitation is described by what's called Dunbar's number. And that number is 150. Now, they did studies with chimps in the wild. They've done studies with people, and they've found that there's about 150 connections, meaningful connections that we can have with people. So they use the term, would you walk into a bar and be able to sit down and have a conversation with that person? If so, then they are part of the 150 in your network, or in your friendship group, or however you like to describe it. Outside of that, you might be uncomfortable sitting down at a bar, having a drink and a conversation with that person. Now, it isn't a hard and fast number. Some research suggests that number is less than that, and some say that it could be much higher than that. So the range could be from 100 to 500. And I think it depends on the individual and a whole lot of other factors. But what's interesting about this is the number of people in villages back in the medieval days. They tended to be around about that number, or certainly less than 500, around about the 150 mark. If we look at chimps in the wild, they also tend to thrive up to about that number before it breaks off into separate troops. So Dunbar's number is a way to kind of show you that there's limitations. Does that mean that companies can only get to be 150? Well, no, it doesn't mean that, but that needs to be taken into account. So the company Gore-Tex took this number of 150 and said, we will not allow any more than 150, roughly, people in one building. And there will only be 150 car spaces. Now, they built another building to grow into, and that was perhaps only just next door with another car park. They found that 150 working in a building was a magic number. It's meant that people would work harmoniously, and then they moved to having another building. Now, we've explored the upper limits of human communication, what that means and how it drives value for bigger companies. But what about at the other end of the scale, going down to small teams? So the military know this very well, and the US military has a very small unit. The smallest unit in the infantry is called a fire team, and this is 4 individuals, a leader, a rifleman, and other specialists, and they are very nimble and able to go and do things. Now, sports teams offer us an excellent way to diagnose high-performance teams. Soccer teams or football teams are really good examples because you have 11 players on the field who are all contributing to the objective, which is to score goals and defend from attacking goals, but with each member with extremely diverse sets of skills. Yes, they're all great athletes, but a goalkeeper's skills are very different to the striker's skills. And if you're on the left-hand side of the field, you have different skills to the right. If you're a midfielder versus a back, all the skills are very, very different. And it's a really good way to understand how a team can have a specific set of objectives but have unique skills and be able to communicate and coordinate together to achieve an objective. Now, in the workplace, a really good example is the agile process, in particular Scrum. Now, Scrum defines teams of developers with particular roles for 2 people, being the Scrum Master and the product owner, and then everybody else is a developer. Now, in the guidelines for Scrum, they talk about the maximum number being around about 10 members. But often you'll find that people talk about Scrum teams being more effective at even smaller numbers than that, 5, 6, 7 team members. So why is it that Scrum limits the number of members of the team? Now, it comes back to Metcalfe's law. Simply, the more people you have in that team, the more lines of communication, and it becomes out of control and impossible to manage. Now, in my own personal experience, I was given the role of managing an R&T team that had 25 people in it. And I realized retrospectively that I was not able to really do that job. It was too many people in that team. And in the literature, they say 12 reports is about as many as any manager can handle. If they are getting beyond that number, then they're often ignoring people. And that was one of the things that I was doing accidentally, was not really paying attention to everybody who reported to me. So Scrum has its basis in keeping the team small, because of the limits of communication or the overburden of having too many lines of communication. Now, if you've ever been into meetings where there's lots and lots of people, you'll begin to realize how ineffective they really are. They become big time-wasting meetings. It works if one person is delivering all the results. It's like an update to the team. I've seen that, and that can be quite effective. But if it's actually a team collaborative meeting, then the team needs to be small. And I believe that anything going into double digits, anything over 10, becomes ineffective. And it's better off to break the team down into smaller groups and then have them work separately and perhaps report back up. And that's essentially what you see in the military, where you have these small fire teams, and then they become bigger squads, and then sections and so on, different words that they use to sort of help coordinate the capabilities of the small teams and coordinate them into bigger groups and have bigger objectives, as we do in big companies. So right back to, how small teams can become effective and be part of a large team. Well, we have a hierarchy. We have the CEO, the board of directors, we have the middle level managements, the VPs, and going down until we'll get all the way down to the developers and the team leads. That's one way to coordinate the effectiveness of small teams into a big organization. So what are some of the problems that you face when you have teams that are too large? So number one, meetings become too long. So if you have a whole bunch of people, everybody needs to have something to say. The meeting goes on and on and on and on. And nobody wants to be in a long meeting, number one. Number two, people start to check out. That area of interest isn't mine. I don't need to listen to that. I'll go and do something else. Checking out of a meeting means you should probably not be there. So checking out is another problem. Number three is cliques start to form. So people will go into the room and even sit together, and they'll have private discussions whilst the big meeting is going on, rather than having everybody involved in conversation. There's little private conversations going on. And number four, often in an attempt to control the meeting and to try and be cognizant of time, somebody steps up as a leader or a boss and starts to be directive. So you do this, you do this, you do that, just to make it more efficient. Now, that doesn't give collaboration a chance, it doesn't give innovation, it doesn't give problem solving to emerge. A lot of problems can be created out of that. So in conclusion, what can a CEO do to leverage the power of small teams and grow a large organization? Well, keep the teams small. You're growing your company. It might start with 5 people. All of a sudden you're employing more. They've all got the same mission. Things start to break down when you get to about 10 people. So break that down into smaller teams with smaller objectives. For example, projects can be defined and project teams can be formed up. Scrum teams can be formed up for development. Marketing teams can be formed up. And you notice this starts to create a natural hierarchy where you have your teams and then you have your team leaders who are then perhaps reporting into you. It's not because you want to be the top of the pile, it's because this is a structure that works and has been proven in the military, in sports, in companies throughout history. Now, if you'd like to know more about being a CEO, subscribe to our channel and look at some of the other videos and other links in the description that we've left for you. We have a special offer at the moment. We're offering anybody a free consultation with me. Just follow the links in the description and we'll have a one-to-one where we can talk about personal leadership and being a CEO. I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.